What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Thank you so much for tuning into my channel. It is greatly appreciated. Today we're going to be talking about crankbaits, why they've earned their spot as #1 choice in my tackle box, no matter what body of water I'm on. I'm going to go over why the crankbait is special, why I decided to buy over 50 of the same crankbait. I'm going to give you 3 reasons. #1 being big fish potential. The crankbait imitates a dying bait fish or dying forage, which is what a bass feeds on. So what better way to trigger a strike out of a large fish than to imitate its main food source? Bass are predators, as we all know. When they see the weakest link in a school of bait fish, they choose that particular shad or bait fish as their prey, because it's much easier to hunt and they have to expend less energy to kill that fish. So that's exactly what a crankbait does. It imitates a dying or wounded bait fish. Another key feature of the crankbait that gives it big fish potential is the amount of time a fish has to decide whether or not to eat this. So the fish might not even be hungry, but its predatory instincts tell it to attack this weak bait fish. When a big bass sees this thing knocking along and deflecting off of cover, and they see that it's wounded, or that's what it appears to be, he will be more likely to take this than anything else. So that's the first reason why I value a crankbait so much. Alright, so the second reason I value a crankbait is for its water coverage, its ability to cover water. And I find that eliminating unproductive water, no matter if you're in a tournament or pleasure fishing, is absolutely necessary in building a productive pattern. With a crankbait, this becomes a relatively easy process. So if you believe that there's fish in an area in a certain depth zone, there's a crankbait made to hit that depth zone and entice those fish to bite. So if you find yourself tired of covering water, power fishing a jig, power fishing soft plastics, if you're an impatient fisherman like I am, the crankbait is for you. But with that being said, let's talk about a spinnerbait and a chatterbait. They don't have a bill. They're not going to be forced to stay at one depth throughout the duration of a cast. And that's why I say the crankbait has superb water coverage properties. You're able to cover a large portion of the water column in one cast, and you're also able to switch up your target depth zone depending on how the fish are biting. Here are some illustrations that might help you understand exactly what I'm talking about when I say the crankbait is your best option for covering water. As you can see in the illustration here, the stars for the crankbait represent potential points of attack for a fish. So if the crankbait is coming by, these little stars represent where the fish is probably going to smack that crankbait out of a reaction strike or out of hunger. Water coverage. So that brings me to the third reason why I value a crankbait, and that would be its ease of use. Basically, how easy it is to use, how foolproof it is. You can get away with not really knowing what you're doing and throwing a crankbait because it provides its own action, and you don't really have to add anything to it. The only additional action that you could give a crankbait is modifying your retrieve, your speed. Twitching the crankbait gives it a little bit more of an erratic action as well. Deflecting your crankbait off of the bottom. The bill does all of the work. If it comes out of the box not running true, if it's not running directly straight back to you on a retrieve, you might have to tweak the eyelet here. Some guys like to change out the treble hooks. If it comes from the factory with really sharp hooks, you don't have to worry about that either. That's another reason why I love the crankbait. Before I go in depth on why I bought these Bandit Ledge 250 crankbaits in particular in such a large amount, I want to talk about the bills on a crankbait and get into some specifics real quick. So the bill determines the action of the bait. The water temperature determines the activity of the bass and their food sources. In colder water, fish are going to expend less energy on movement. Thus, they have tighter movement. This applies to bait fish and bass. They do this to conserve energy throughout the colder months of the year. Calls for a tighter action on your crankbait. They're going to be swimming very tight and slowly. Mimicking that action in the colder months is real necessary, and that's when I go to a very narrow bill crankbait. Colder months, I go with tighter action crankbaits, tighter wobble, because of the temperature. Simple as that. As the water warms up in the springtime and the fish start moving around more and the bass start having more energy to catch these bait fish, that's when I switch to a square bill, because the square bill provides a very wide wobble. It deflects off of cover more effectively and more erratic than any other bill. When it comes to the Bandit Ledge 250, if you had to have a compromise between a square bill and a narrow bill, this design right here on the Bandit Ledge 250 provides a good mix of these two actions. That tight, narrow swim action and that wide wobble of the square bill. Let's talk about why I love the Bandit Ledge Series 250. So first of all, I really like the color selection that Bandit has provided. They've got bluegill colors, 2 different variations. You've got a couple of different craw options. They've got a red craw, a brown craw as well. And you've got chartreuse fleck. This really provides a lot of reflection and it gets noticed. So you can be in dirtier water and throw this crankbait. It's also, they all have rattles as well. Fish see it, fish want it, fish eat it. Then you've got your fried squash color, and I find this to be an extremely effective color in clear water. They've also got your standard white for very dirty water. So that's number one. Second, I really like the body size on this crankbait. It comes in at 2 3/4 inches, so it's a bit bigger than their 1, 2, and 300 series baits, but it's not so big that it's overbearing or too heavy. You can get this thing way out, which is very important to get this bait down into the target depth zone for a longer period of time. One more really awesome feature is that despite its larger size, this bait creates absolutely no resistance. You can throw it all day. I got tired of throwing crankbaits that hurt my arm, found this guy, never looked back. So that pretty much covers crankbaits in general and the Bandit Ledge 250, which I ordered 55 of. I love crankbaits, guys. They catch big bags of fish. So next time you guys are out on the water, if you're not a fan of a crankbait, I suggest you start to learn them. Be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Thank you for joining me, as always, guys.